Hey everybody, it's Jason from the Texas Gun Vault, and once again it's time for the Texas Gun Vault Poll Question of the Week, a weekly vlog that I put out where I ask you as my viewers and subscribers about something that deals with guns, gun culture, politics, current events, the news, or something fun like EDC that I want to get your thoughts and opinions on. And this week's question goes back to a topic that we've discussed ad nauseum, not only on this channel but many other channels, the ATF pistol brace rule. Now, this is something that was making headlines in the gun world for months. Everybody was freaking out. Oh my gosh, it's the end of the world. This is the greatest overreach the ATF has ever had. And I understand why many people think that. Everybody was scared. They were going to get raided by the ATF. Millions of people were going to be arrested as felons and go to jail. They would have mass incarcerations. There would be Ruby Ridges and Wacos all over the country. And we've had some time now since this rule was implemented. So now we can look back with hindsight and be like, okay, so what actually happened? Was it an overreaction? And let's look at the future. What's going to happen when it comes to this rule in the court? After all, we just got a huge win when it comes to the 80% frames case that was before a circuit court. They said it's unconstitutional. The ATF did not have the ability or the authority to change the rules when it comes to what is a firearm and what is not a firearm because of federal law. So does this mean that the future of this pistol brace ruling is going to go down the same way? This one affects way more people than the 80%ers, and if it does affect us in a positive way, is it going to be broad? Is it going to be limited? Or is some judge going to try to build their career on being the most innovative thinker possible and find a reason for the government to actually be able to regulate these things? And that's what I wanted to ask you all. So, without further ado, let's dive right into this week's poll question. With the landmark New York State Rifle and Pistol Association Incorporated versus Bruin case last summer, we are starting to see some, but not all, lower courts applying the new standard to Second Amendment cases and ruling in a very pro-2A direction. In fact, this past week we heard a federal court overturn the ATF's 80% receiver rule. Do you think the ATF's pistol brace rule will be reversed in a similar manner due to the Bruin decision and ruled unconstitutional? Please do not vote for what you want to happen, but rather what you think will happen. And apparently, I also had a typo in there, and I forgot to put in a question mark after the actual question. I'm an absolute knucklehead. But I think you guys know exactly what I was asking. And I think this is an important thing to talk about because often when it comes to these cases or when I make videos about the ATF pistol brace rule and I say, guys, there's nothing coming down the pipe that's going to stop this. I was told over and over again, Jason, you're an idiot. Look at all these cases that have been filed. And I was like, yeah, they've been filed, but are they actually going anywhere? One of the sayings that I've been using in many of my videos, people have been saying in the comments, and other YouTubers have been saying, in fact, I borrow it from another YouTuber named Navy Man, where I heard it from. He said, hope is not a plan. So many people can look at these rules and say, it is obvious and self-evident that this is unconstitutional. And we see all these YouTubers saying, breaking news, big win, because people are filing these cases. And everyone's like, well, it's obvious that it's unconstitutional. These cases are going forward. We've won. Let's live on hope. And that's not the way the world actually works. A lot of people in the comment sections of my video will say, this is wrong. It's unconstitutional. The ATF can't make law. But they completely ignore how the rule of law and the regulations are actually enforced here in the United States. You can say things all you want. It doesn't mean it's actually true or what happens in practice. Sometimes in law, there's two sides of the coin. We have the theory of law, and you have the practice of law. In theory, yes, it's unconstitutional, and the ATF cannot make laws. You're absolutely right. But what's the actual practice of the law? It can be something completely different. The application is different than the theory. And a lot of times I think people in the gun world live in the world of the theory of the law. It's blatantly unconstitutional. The ATF can't create law. And I know I'm saying that over and over again. But that's not what actually happens in practice. And saying it over and over and over and over again doesn't change the fact. But we do have a pressure release valve. Obviously, that is the courts. Throughout the history of the United States, we have had a long tradition of the separation of powers. The executive branch trying to exert power over the legislative branch, and they push back, and then the judicial branch pushing back on the other three. However, I think a lot of you will agree that now all three branches of government are kind of working together for the consolidation of power and the growth of the government. They're all on the same side. There's not really a checks and balances anymore because the interests of different people in different branches are now all the same. They're working together for a collective goal. Now, I do know there is some push and pull, and sometimes you will get those checks and balances, but let's take a look at the lower courts. Even judges that we assume are conservative or that were nominated by conservative presidents will often look at their career and go, I want to show everybody how smart I am. So even though a clear reading of the Constitution would invalidate this law or this rule, I'm going to come up with some type of clever way of upholding it. I'm going to show everybody how awesome I am, how an amazing thinker I am, and find these weird rules and histories and traditions that have nothing to do with the actual law and regulation, but somehow convoluted into an opinion where I can empower the government. And then I will be applauded in my circles and at the cocktail parties for the legal genius that I am. So I no longer have faith in judges actually looking at the Constitution and taking their bias out of it, which is, by the way, what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to look at a law and go, I might not agree with the law. I wouldn't have voted for anybody that would have written this law. However, when I look at the Constitution and the plain reading of the text, well, the law is constitutional. I don't have to like it, but it's the way it works, or vice versa. But today we have justices that take their political philosophy and write opinions to try to uphold or strike down laws because of that opinion. They're no longer unbiased, and you can't trust them. And that's where this falls into play when it comes to the lower courts. We do have a number of cases that are trying to get this thrown out. And people right now are celebrating, saying, oh my gosh, we have all these injunctions. But let's just be honest here. When it came to the 80% receiver rule, that was a national opinion, and it affected everybody. It didn't matter if you were a member of the FPC or the NRA or the GOA. It was across the board because the justices and the judges knew, no, that's unconstitutional. But when it comes to the pistol brace rule, let's take a look at these injunctions that everybody's celebrating. Well, it really affects a very small amount of people. I mean, when it comes to all of the gun owners in the United States, how many of them are actually members of these organizations? Yes, a lot of people signed up for them, but compared to the population as a whole and the number of gun owners as a whole, it's very, very small. So it's not like the judges look at this and go, oh yeah, it is absolutely unconstitutional. We're going to do a nationwide injunction until we have this all figured out. They didn't do that, which gives me pause. It gives me reservations. But I'll tell you guys more about my opinion and which one of these options I would have voted for. But let's see what you guys had to say with this week's results. With 129 votes this week, we have, yes, the pistol brace rule will be ruled unconstitutional, 47%. Yes, but the ruling will be limited and still allow for some bans, 23%. No, the courts will side with the government and uphold it, 9%. Neither. These cases will drag on for years or decades, 19%. And something else, explain in the comments, 1%. Now, when it comes to those results, I still feel like so many people are believing the BS that many other legal firearms channels are saying. They're believing the clickbaity thumbnail saying, great news, breaking news, groundbreaking, when nothing's really happening. And they're also looking at what the law is and the rule is and honestly saying it is unconstitutional and just assuming the courts are going to do what they're supposed to do. And I look at that as actually being a little bit naive. Well, let's go through each one of these and I'll give you guys my personal opinion. First, we have, yes, the pistol brace rule will be ruled unconstitutional. And I have to agree with almost probably everybody watching this video. The rule is unconstitutional. However, it's going to be enforced. And I have to say, when it looks back on what's actually happened, nothing really has happened when it comes to the enforcement. As far as I can tell, people that are not covered by this injunction have not been raided. I'm not aware of anybody being arrested or having any firearm confiscated. The biggest change is just that you can't buy them in stores anymore. You can actually still buy the brace and you can buy AR or AK style pistols. You just can't put the two together. So it's not stopping people from either buying them or, I guess, using them because nothing's really happening. I'm assuming that there are probably millions of people that have no idea that this rule has even gone into effect, that anything has changed. They don't follow the news like you or I, and they're still going to gun ranges and going to shoot, but no one's being arrested, no guns are being confiscated, no one's houses are being raided. So what's really going on here? Well, I have a theory about they're waiting it out, but I'll talk about that in a moment. But I understand why so many people think this is going to be ruled unconstitutional, but I personally think that's more based on hope than anything else. Then we have, yes, but the ruling will be limited and still allow for some bans. Now, this is one that I possibly could vote for because I actually see it working this way, and the way the injunctions have been written have kind of panned this out. The justices are like, okay, there might be parts of this that are unconstitutional, but we're not going to do a nationwide injunction because we think there is some merit to this. So if the judges actually overturn some aspect of it, I could see it being very narrow, only applying to certain guns that meet certain qualifications. Or they might even say, well, if you're not disabled and not using the brace as it was initially designed and intended, you're actually breaking the law. They can say you can only use it if you are disabled. I can see that type of ruling, but it's not going to be a nationwide overturning of the rule. And once again, that's because the justices, you might get an anti-gun justice or a judge that doesn't like the Second Amendment or trying to prove to the people that nominated them, who might be Democrat, that I'm your guy, I'm your gal, nominate me for a higher court because I upheld your ruling. Then we have, no, the courts will side with the government and uphold it. And this is the one that I would actually have voted for. You guys know that when it comes to the future of the Second Amendment, I'm actually kind of a pessimist. I think we're going to lose this fight in the end, regardless of what other channels are saying that we're winning. I don't really see it because the more that these cases are adjudicated under the Bruin standard, you find that so many judges are trying to work around that. They're trying to be clever. They're trying to come up with new reasonings and rationales to uphold very egregious gun laws, going back to some town's ordinance from 1650 and say, see, it was part of the history and tradition that you couldn't carry a billy club. Therefore, we can ban assault weapons. The two have nothing to do with each other, and good, you actually found this ordinance in some history book of a town in Massachusetts from 1650. Man, that's a big stretch. But they're going to go to their cocktail parties, they're going to go around to their buddies and be like, I'm the smartest one in this room. And they're going to love those accolades. And that's the way I think it's going to be because they're all on the same page. They all want to increase the power of the government. And when it comes to the judiciary as a whole, there's way more judges that have been nominated by Democrats than there are Republicans. So it's also a numbers game. Most likely, these cases are going to go before Democrat-appointed judges. And judges who no longer care about an unbiased view of the Constitution, they have an agenda. So I actually think it will not be overturned. I know that might make some people sad because you want to hear the hope. I'm just trying to be realistic. Then we have neither. These cases will drag on for years or decades, and that's actually what I think is going to happen, and then nothing's going to happen. So what I was talking about earlier, about they're playing the long game, they're playing this waiting game. Let's look at the bump stock ban. You know, when Donald Trump ordered the ATF to ban bump stocks, there was a lot of talk. There were lots of YouTube videos about it. Everybody was mad. And then the ban came. And then It was quiet. Yes, there are a few cases now, and in some circuits we have these cases going through. Some people said, oh, in the Fifth Circuit they've overturned it. They haven't overturned it. They just sent it back down to the lower court, saying you need to redo this again under the Bruin decision and adjudicate it that way. But it's not a complete win. But where's all the momentum now for bump stocks? Where's all the people saying, we have to get this overturned? It's the greatest overreach of all time. Nowhere. And why is that? Because gun owners have an attention span of about this much. They get real mad and they get real fired up over certain things. And then they forget. They move on to the next thing because they see those clickbaity thumbnails of groundbreaking, breaking news of something else that's happened. Something else egregious has happened, like that gun store in Montana that got raided by the IRS and the ATF. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is a new standard for how they're enforcing gun law. Then everybody was mad about that. Or everybody got mad about Matt Hoover and CRS firearms. And then everyone forgot about bump stocks. And that's just the way it is. I mean, how many people are still talking about Operation Reticent Recall and the FRT triggers? Nobody. Why? Because that's old news. And guess what? The FRT triggers are still being gone after. The bump stocks are still banned. They're waiting. That's it. They play the long game because they know that over time, they're not going to do any mass enforcements, any mass arrests. They're not going to do any of that. They just want the rule to go into place. Everything's fine. There's no big brouhaha. And then after a couple of years, you've forgotten about it. Your passion level has gone down. Your emotions have gone down. And then we have a new standard. Yep, that's where the game is being played now. It's at this level where it used to be at this level. And they win over time. They don't want to make a big deal about it. It's going to drag on for years and decades. And when the rulings finally come down, everyone will be like, yeah, we haven't had braces or bump stocks in 10 years. Why do I care about this now? And if you don't believe me, look at the ban on machine guns in 1986. When that went through, there were a lot of people that were really mad. In fact, Wayne LaPierre went on the news and says, we are going to fight hard to get machine guns back. Well, did they ever fight hard to get machine guns back? Nope. Well, where are we now? It's 2023. Yeah, it's almost 40 years later. And guess what? We don't have machine guns. And most people aren't upset about that anymore. They're like, yeah, machine guns are banned. It's just the way that it is. Many people that are gun owners now weren't even alive when machine guns were legal. So that's how they change the culture. That's their game. They want to wait and then they win. And then finally, we have something else explained in the comments. Pretty much everybody agreed that it was going to be one of those other solutions. So that's how I feel about this and my thoughts on it. And as I said, I know some people are going to be upset with me because I'm not giving you hope. But let's see what you guys had to say this week with the top-rated comments. And our top-rated comment of the week comes from Dorig143, who said, I think this will be overturned in the lower courts, then appealed and dragged through the courts for at least one more year until and if the Supreme Court decides to take the case. Yeah, I completely agree. It's going to go nowhere, and by the time it gets to the Supreme Court, no one's going to care. It's just like bump stocks. So many people go, those were just gimmicks. They were range toys. It's not serious. I didn't want one. My friends didn't have one. I don't care. They can stay banned. Well, in a couple of years, people are going to say the same thing about pistol braces. Then we have Tim Smith 9493 who said, yes, it will be overturned, but it will take time. Everyone wants it right away, and that's not how all this works. We are definitely making progress on reversing these stupid rules, but it's a process. And absolutely, once again, someone talking about the long game. And that is the frustration I think that people have. They want everything now. Look at all these court cases. I want immediate relief. And that's not the way our courts work. In fact, I do complain that our courts do work too slow. It's okay if they work slow so we can get the right rulings and people can do the right research and people have their days in courts. But it's unfortunate that these rulings take so long. These decisions can be in these courts, whereas we're waiting for them to be released for literally years. Then we have Chaotic Can I In EJB, not sure how to pronounce that. Hope is not a strategy. And I've already said that, and that is exactly right. Then we have Gooski Works 5976, who says, the trend seems to be favoring the allowance of unconstitutional laws and rules, as only some lower courts find them unconstitutional. Eventually, the Supreme Court may take them up to agree, then liberal states give them the finger and infringe upon their citizens' rights anyway, with no penalty. Yep, and that's why the judiciary, in my opinion, is losing so much faith of the people. People don't look at them anymore. You know, people do complain that, okay, they've made their ruling, now they have to enforce it. The lower courts and the blue states are just going to thumb their nose at the courts and be like, okay, let's litigate it all again. Then it has to start at the lower courts, go to the appellate courts, get appealed, go to en banc. Then maybe one day, 10 years from now, the Supreme Court will deal with it again. They'll write an even more definitive opinion than the lower courts, and the blue states will defy them again and has to go through it all again. It's this endless cycle, and it's pretty sad. And then finally, we have Brian Edgett, 2134, who said, it's my belief the ruling will be very important, but limited. And I think that is a very rational way of looking at this. It's a very realistic way of looking at this. As I said, if things do get overturned, most likely they will say, if you have a legitimate disability, you can have and use pistol braces. But if you aren't using them the way they are designed, they're going to be SBRs. That might be the way that it goes, so the judges can walk the line and say, see, we overturned the rule, but they're still banned from most applications. That's my personal opinion. Hope is not a strategy. I'm not here to give you guys false hopes. I'm here to give you reality and hopefully truth. And of course, these are my opinions, and you are free to disagree, but only time will tell what actually will happen. So that is the Texas Gun Vault Poll Question of the Week. I hope you guys enjoyed it and enjoy these discussions. I'm looking forward to seeing all the things you have to say in the comments section below. And if you want to participate in next week's poll, please go to the community tab of my YouTube channel. I will put a link in the description and as a pinned comment. Please go over there, see what the poll is about, vote, comment, and like other people's comments so we can get the top rated comments of the week. So once again, I hope you're enjoying these great discussions. I enjoy interacting with you, and I look forward to the next one. So, as always, thanks for watching.